man. All right, let's get comfortable in front of our fireside. Was there a challenge there for us to bring the fire? Is that what I heard?
I think so.
Okay, excellent.
Not the rain, though.
Not the rain. Well, yeah, we're in London. That takes care of itself. So thank you so much for traveling all the way from Scottsdale in Arizona to be with us here today. Sam already mentioned your role and the company name, but just in case people aren't familiar with Pretty Litter, which, by the way, sounds brilliant in a beautifully enunciated English accent. Could you maybe why don't we start there and just talk for a moment about who Pretty Litter? Didn't I just say it sounds great in a well-enunciated accent and then I butchered it? Just a little bit about who Pretty Litter are, what your product is, and just a little bit about what the business is, just to get us rolling.
Sure. Unfortunately, it's not yet available in the UK, but Pretty Litter is a specialty litter that changes colors when your cat is sick. So based on the pH balance, it will actually change a couple different colors, notifying you, hey, we should take your cat into the vet. We're a subscription company, which makes perfect sense for a litter because the litter bag lasts once a month, and you need litter every month because you don't want a stinky box, obviously.
Right.
So it really played well into our business model. We're direct-to-consumer primarily, so I head up the e-commerce world of our D2C site, but we're also in Walmart and Target in the US.
Okay, I don't know if I can ask you this, or can we talk? Can you give any indication about the size of the company, the size of the business? Are we in safe ground to talk about that?
Sort of. Sure, I'll get yelled at.
Okay,
but we currently
only what you're comfortable with.
We're currently at about 30 employees. I started when we were closer to 10 with only one dev, so we've done some decent growth, and that was about 2 years ago when I started. We're over 100 million, I'll say that, last year in direct-to-consumer with, I believe, over a little 20 million in retail. So.
Okay, all right, so we're talking about a business which is thriving and growing, and a reminder, we're talking about cat litter. Yes. We love our pets in the world, and so this is a huge business. Awesome. So with that little bit of context setting, can I ask you a little bit about the stack you're on now, and also, how did you arrive at that? I mean, has there been a long process to kind of get into the architecture you're in? Could you maybe just paint us a little bit of a picture about the way things work?
Of course. So again, going back 2 years ago when I started, we are just straightforward on Shopify Plus. We use Recharge for our subscriptions. And we are getting a lot of pushback on page speed. So again, the out-of-the-box Shopify liquid templates are notorious for being slower. There's a lot to load. So we are kind of looking for a solution to that and starting to get some pressure from my president who's like, page speed, page speed, page speed. Again, the site was performing well, but having come back 4 years ago, I was working on an agency, and we had started looking into this thing called Headless Commerce. Right. We were working with IBM on their WebSphere commerce sites, which was on-prem at that time, but they were looking to move over to cloud hosted with like micro APIs and everything like that. Yeah. So we were developing a product called Mobicom, which would be kind of a headless front end, way before its time. Didn't get bought on by the brands we were working with, but it stuck in my mind. And then 4 years later, I had that as a solution. I was talking to one of our consultants, and he recommended Netlify. We did a proof of concept within a few weeks.
Within a few weeks.
Right. Our dev said he built it in 3 days. Luckily, we are a very straightforward acquisition funnel, so we have a homepage, a get started flow. So in that regard, we're a little different from a larger catalog store. But we did A/B tests, and it proved out a 10% increase in conversion just on the basic stuff.
On the proof of concept?
Yep, just on the proof of concept.
Wow, okay.
And we built from there. So.
That's amazing. Okay, so it's interesting you're saying that you were kind of looking at this approach a few years ago and trying to kind of like push in that direction. Was there anything that kind of led to that tipping point for you actually being able to say, okay, look, it's time, we're going to make a proof of concept? Was there something that led to that, or was it just, it was you'd been shouting for 4 years and then you persuaded people?
I think just kind of the limitations with the out-of-the-box solutions, especially as we started to look and are looking at still our out-of-the-box solution with Recharge, which is the checkout. There's just limitations to what you can and can't do there. So one of our goals was to take the checkout headless also, which we have done a proof of concept of. Again, it was about even with where we're at, but that's without some of the bells and whistles that the checkout with Recharge has, like Apple Pay, Google Pay.
Right.
So our goal now is, since we have that kind of even tier, we're going to go in and start improving it. But since we know that it's not a bad investment, we know that we could add in a lot of extra features for AOV increases, upsells, post-sales. Post-sales for us is huge. We've already captured the credit card info. Sky's the limit after that, right? It's not going to affect conversion rate. It's just added increased value, especially when we're looking at our other products, such as food, where people are like, okay, yeah, cat food, cat litter makes sense.
Sure.
But you don't want to interrupt them too much with different things in the buy flow, because obviously you'll lose people. So I think in that regard, it's endless possibilities with the checkout.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting. Once you've got to the point that you've kind of rolled out onto a new stack, and it sounds like you haven't explored too far down, or you haven't executed too far down the road of the things that are available next, but those are kind of unlocked now by the sound of things. Yeah. So can I ask you a tiny little bit in more detail about the stack, or what technologies are used there? I mean, obviously you've mentioned some of the Shopify pieces in there as well. But in terms of how's the front end built, and just some of the lines and boxes of the architecture?
Sure. So we're on Vue next, and then we have just moved over to Tailwind, and we're hosted on Netlify. We rolled out our POC on Netlify, and then soon after we moved over to the Netlify Edge, just to again improve on our page speed performance.
Nice. I'm really curious about this proof of concept. I mean, I think the developer should have said it took him a week, or took them a week, rather than took them 3 days. I would have padded that a tiny bit myself.
Well, he never pads anything, so he's always telling the president one thing, and I'm saying, hey, no, this is probably going to take longer. And I'm usually right, but he wants to say we could do everything overnight, which is never the case.
So what was included in that proof of concept? What kind of pieces of the journey were built out in that?
Yeah. So again, homepage through our Get Started flow, which is a cat selector, a few upsells. We knew there are other pages. Well, actually, anything in our top nav that were more like marketing pages that we knew people were flowing to, we built those out first. But knowing like a lot of the other detailed pages, we didn't need to go there yet until this was proven out. Once it was proven out, we went and did everything, including our blog, which actually drives a decent amount of conversions. And when we moved over to Headless, we did see a little drop in our SEO, just because we were new to it and hadn't really factored in some of the effects. We've since addressed that, but luckily our performance helps balance out any of the loss with traffic. So we saw conversion rate increase a lot. Traffic just from the SEO sources decreased a bit, but revenue was way up just from the page speed.
Interesting. Well, yeah. So, I mean, it's a theme that we've heard so many times over the last day or so, but performance, it matters. So having the ability for your development team to be able to control and craft that sounds like that's a huge win, right? Yeah, interesting. And how have you found, or has it impacted the team? So the team that are working on these things, has it had much of a change for their day-to-day, or their ability to execute, or things like velocity? I mean, what kind of impacts have you seen in that area?
Yeah, well, again, when we first started, we had a dev, our senior dev, pretty much doing live updates on our Shopify templates. So in terms of a quicker update, those were pretty fast. We could still do that, but from day one, I was like, okay, we need to implement Jira, we need processes, we need environments, especially as we went from one dev to a larger dev team. So I think if anything, it's really brought more stability in QA and quality and everything like that to our production. So it also, we didn't just go through a simple route. We built, in order to address some of the caching issues that we were seeing, we built these kind of mono repo apps that really helped us every time we did a build prevent a lot of the different caching issues we were experiencing in the different applications. So our main e-commerce app is one, our blog is one. So we don't just update the blog and it has to refresh everything. We also went towards Cloudinary for CDN, which really helps with images and everything like that. So, we've matured a lot since we first did our proof of concept.
Yeah, right. And it sounds like, there are so many components here that interplay and have to kind of live together seamlessly. Has has that brought any particular challenges for you in terms of like, well, now we had one place first of all where most of this was built, and now we're using a variety of tools, a variety of services. One of the occasional bits of pushback I hear is like, but what if that falls over? What if that fails? Then your business fails, right? Was it hard to give comfort to the stakeholders about resilience and the likelihood of things like that happening?
Yeah, well, the good thing is, again, we're a test-focused culture. So when we went out with the proof of concept, it was hosted on a subdomain. We had everything still with Shopify.
Yeah.
So if one went down, we still had the other there. So luckily, there was a lot of incrementality over the years building on these systems, and that gave us confidence. As well as I was always open to having outside consultants. I told our dev team, even though we're small, I'll find an expert to guide us through this. We don't have to learn it all on our own.
Yeah.
Let's learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
And that has really helped us. It also kept us very lean. So we got kind of the best of both worlds there.
Nice, yeah. And I always took great comfort in the fact that, well, if we're going to use a digital asset management system, if we're going to build something into our build tool chain that's going to, I don't know, optimize images and have a big kind of pipeline for that, we could build that ourselves. But Cloudinary have done that a lot. That's their business. Yeah. And I kind of take some comfort in the idea that, we're leaning on domain experts there, so we don't have to do that. So do you think that kind of thing this is a very leading question, isn't it? I would imagine that kind of thing has taken some of the burden off a lean development team, so they can focus on things that are more pertinent to your business. Is that fair to say?
Definitely. And we were talking a little last night, you know, dev teams always want to build everything from scratch.
Absolutely.
And they enjoy that, and that's the challenge. Yeah. So I'm always have to push back and say, hey, if there's already a solution out there, let's find that first. We could build on top of it and do great things, whether it's Netlify, Shopify Recharge, especially with the APIs out there. There's tons we could build on top, but there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. So that way, Netlify, Cloudinary, Shopify, all these different SaaS platforms really help get you 0 to 60, and your team's able to go from that 60 to 100, which is awesome. You just have to explain that to your dev teams. Like, don't worry, you're going to work on cool things. Right. We're just not building everything from scratch because it just doesn't make sense any longer.
And so this is harking back to my time as a front end developer, and your quite correct observation that we all want to build some of these things ourselves. But does the development team come with technologies that they're interested in as well, that they want to use? I mean, so for instance, you mentioned that the front end is built using Vue, and you also drop Tailwind into there as well, and that sounds like that's something that's arriving more recently. Is that right? Yeah,
and I think it kind of speaks to my management style. I believe in that whole Google 80/20 world, and really keeping your devs engaged. Luckily, we're very agile, and although we're no longer a startup, we're still in that mentality. We want to embrace new technology. We don't want to be behind. So again, I've let our team explore things, and that's where we went into the Tailwind piece. That they brought it to my attention. I said, just prove out an ROI and let's test it out. And I think that's worked really well with our team. There's sometimes I have to say no, but we've also helped them learn conditioning around business rules and I have a great idea, but is there an ROI? Are we just building something to build something? That just doesn't pay the bills, unfortunately.
Right. I always feel like a development team will do its best work if they're enjoying, the experience. I'm part of a developer experience team, so maybe I'd say that. But of course, that is only really valid if it's in service of a good user experience, because ultimately, that's, like you say, there needs to be a suitable return on investment there. Does it feel like the development team is kind of invested in being able to say, well, there's this tooling that should we consider that, and that they're able to do that now?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I spoke a little bit to my manager skills, but I got to give a lot of credit to our devs. They really took this on, going from just, hey, I'm building on out-of-the-box frameworks to, hey, we're building this huge project of stuff that they weren't necessarily comfortable with. They've done a great job. Our senior dev really has excelled and stepped up. He went from just our web dev to our senior dev. So,
right. Nice.
there's been a lot of growth in the last few years. And they're very invested. So he's always thinking of new technologies. We just launched our back-end portal, which is our subscription management piece, also headless. And he said, hey, we should implement a logging tool just so I could better gauge what's working, what's not, versus kind of being blind or trying to use GA or something like that.
Yeah.
And that helped out a lot too. So again, it's being receptive to new technologies, but also having people who are really invested, who are throwing out ideas. It just makes us better.
Yeah. Oh, how would that have looked in the before time on your previous stack? I mean, did you have approaches for that you then adapted, or were some of these things just off the table?
Yeah, we started kind of from scratch. So,
okay.
We've added in these complexities as we've grown as a dev team, as they're necessary, right? You don't need to build a Ferrari when you still need like kind of just a basic car, right?
Yeah.
So we needed the car first. Now we're adding the bigger engines, all the other necessities. So.
Yeah, I love as well the prospect of saying, okay, well, we built out our first iteration of this, and it's performing as well, at least as well as what we had before. Yeah. And there are still things that you haven't added to that. It sounds like something like the payment processes you're going to iterate on and those kind of things. So what does the roadmap look like for you for like timings of rolling things out? Is the velocity changed? Have you got loads of plans that like span down the road, and now it's a question of, well, what do we do next? How's that working?
Yeah, so just one thing I want to comment really fast. One of my previous vice presidents I worked with always would say, progress, not perfection. A lot of times you get held up and never launch anything because you're so worked up of trying to get it perfect. We've had to be agile in saying, especially with our latest launch around the portal, let's just have an MVP. Let's get it to equal of what we currently have, do some testing, and then build on it from there. Again, you just got to get something out sometimes. So that's where we'll maintain like our velocity and just have that backlog of like, here are the feature enhancements we want to do. Yeah. But at least we have the foundation already done. How long it'll take to get there just kind of depends on the business needs. But it also lets for our devs and other members of the team to come up with creative ideas and keep those in the backlog, but just know they're going to get prioritized when it really makes sense from a business perspective.
Yeah, and I think like shipping things, getting things shipped is like the best superpower, right? And especially if you're in an environment where you can test the results and then iterate on it. I love that philosophy. And I know you've worked in a variety of different sized and different types of organizations like over your career. Do you feel that the size and shape of PrettyLitter as an organization sets it up to be able to be more receptive to this kind of working than maybe some other companies you've worked at because of their relative size and maturity of their platform? Is that a big factor there?
Yeah, I think also the fact that we started with SaaS platforms, that having come from previous agencies and businesses where there are custom platforms and all this old architecture, you kind of get stuck in that, right? And we were talking yesterday again, like this fear of re-platforming. At least with SaaS, we know we could go in and change up different parts, right, of this composable commerce versus kind of this scary thing of, hey, we're going to build this whole new site with a faster front end. It's like, no, we're actually just going to build this one component, and it's easier to pitch from a business sense to the higher ups, as well as there's less risks overall. So I think that's benefited us a lot, and really in our whole executive team, there's this kind of idea of, yes, let's stick with SaaS. Again, why build something from scratch when it already exists? And let them be the experts, but let us, customize as needed. Yeah, nice.
Well, I'm keeping a tiny eye on time, but I feel like I've led you to lots of things that were positive because that's who I am. But we should maybe just take a moment. I mean, were there particular challenges, or are there particular challenges with this approach where you're thinking, this is a point of frustration and I'm still looking for a solution for that? Does anything fit into that box at the moment?
No, but I would say obviously you need to be educated around the infrastructure. If luckily I had some previous exposure to it, some ideas, we brought on the right consultants. We really understood and mapped things out versus going down a certain path. And we kept it simple, right? If again we tried to launch the whole site at once, rebuilding out in Headless, it might not have been a success, or it might have get put on the back burner because, hey, other priorities came up. So, keeping things in smaller parts that you could produce, those all helped. But I could definitely see if you bite off too much, it could fail as an overall project.
Yeah, and I feel that's another theme that I've heard in a number of talks at this event is this opportunity to not just say, okay, we're going to do an entire forest fire, start from scratch, roll out something new. Be able to have this kind of iterative approach where you say, okay, this is the place we're going to roll out the next piece and gradually iterate on that. So that feels like it's a huge enabler that I know that I wish I'd had access to for some of the projects I'd worked on. Okay, well, we kind of touched on it, I think, in that last point, but as we kind of come to the end of our time, are there any kind of final thoughts from you about if someone here was to come and find you in the exhibit hall and say, we're thinking about making the switch from an architecture that's been serving us okay for a while, but we want to make a change. Are there any kind of pearls of wisdom, or kind of what would be your first kind of point of advice for someone who's maybe thinking about taking that leap?
Sure. I guess so. The one area, and I think this is hitting a lot of different companies, is resourcing. It's hard to find good devs these days, so make sure you have the right team in place or start planning for the resources you need. We've run into just kind of some issues around, capacity in terms of bandwidth. So, there's not tons of great Vue devs or other people out there. So just, know that's going to take 6 months probably to find the right team members. Start that early. That way, when you're ready to launch, you have the right resources.
Interesting. Okay, great stuff. Well, thank you so much for sharing the story with us. I was expecting to learn things about composable commerce. I was not expecting to learn how far the technology has come in cat litter, and now the color of the cat litter is a signifier for us. Who knew? Well, you knew. So thanks again for sharing the story. Congratulations on what sounds like a fantastic project.
Thank you.
And please, everyone, join me in thanking Travis Garcia.
Thank you. Yep.